by the time I made that decision, it felt like my chest was permanently tight, like I was breathing through a straw. I kept replaying everything in my head, every conversation, every offhand comment Mark had ever made, and suddenly they all sounded different, darker, calculated. I realized this hadn't been some impulsive idea of his. This had been a slow burn, and the scariest part was that my own sister was either helping him or refusing to see what was right in front of her. So, I chose myself. I chose my sanity. I chose the one thing that had never betrayed me. My house. The first thing I did was follow my lawyer's advice to the letter. I changed every lock on the beach house. I installed security cameras inside and out, the kind that send alerts straight to your phone. I posted no trespassing signs, even though doing that felt dramatic and humiliating, like I was admitting my own family had become a threat. Then I sent the cease and desist letter. Certified mail, signature required, very official, very final. When Emily called me after Mark received it, she was screaming. Actually screaming, like I'd never heard her scream before. She said I was humiliating her husband, that I was treating him like a criminal. I told her calmly that if he didn't want to be treated like one, he shouldn't act like one. That was the moment our relationship truly cracked. For a few days, nothing happened. I started to relax just a little, thinking maybe this had scared Mark enough to back off. I even felt guilty for a split second, wondering if I'd gone too far. That guilt vanished the morning my phone buzzed with a security alert. Motion detected at the front door. I opened the app and there he was, Mark, standing on my porch, trying the new lock, his face twisting with irritation when it didn't open. Then he stepped back and started talking on his phone, gesturing angrily at the house like it had personally offended him. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I called him immediately and told him to leave. He said he was just there to pick up some of his things. I told him he had no things there and that he was trespassing. He scoffed and said he'd be inside whether I liked it or not. That's when I hung up and called the police. Even dialing the number felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. I kept thinking, this can't be my life. This can't be what my family has become. By the time the police arrived, Mark had managed to pry open a window. Watching it unfold through the camera feed was horrifying. This man had eaten at my table, laughed with me, hugged me, and now he was breaking into my home. When the officers confronted him, he put on a show, acting confused, claiming he lived there, that there was some family dispute, and I was being unreasonable. He even tried to joke with them, but jokes don't work when there's paperwork. I emailed the officers proof of ownership, the cease and desist letter, and the footage of him forcing entry. The shift in their demeanor was immediate. They told him to step away from the house. They told him he was trespassing. They told him to put his hands behind his back. I wasn't there in person, but I can still picture it perfectly. The disbelief on his face, the way his mouth opened slightly, like he couldn't comprehend that this wasn't going his way. He wasn't laughing then. Emily arrived shortly after, frantic, crying, begging the officers to let him go. She looked at the house, at the police, at everything, and then she looked at me through the phone when I answered her call, and there was so much anger in her eyes, I barely recognized her. Mark was escorted away, not arrested that time, but formally trespassed and warned. One more incident, they said, and charges would be filed. You'd think that would be the end of it. That a normal person would back off after that. Mark was not a normal person. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Emily sent me long messages accusing me of destroying her marriage, of choosing a house over her. Extended family started getting involved, calling me cold, heartless, dramatic. Some of them said I should just let it go, because it was causing too much tension. Let it go, as if someone trying to steal your home is a minor inconvenience. I started doubting myself again, wondering if maybe I really was being too harsh. That doubt lasted until my lawyer called me with news that made my blood run cold. Mark had filed paperwork, not a legitimate claim, but enough to be a headache. He was alleging an informal agreement, claiming I had promised the house to Emily and him in the future. It was flimsy, but it was aggressive. It was meant to intimidate me into backing down. That was the moment something inside me hardened. I realized this wasn't just about defense anymore. If I didn't end this decisively, it would never stop. So I went on the offensive. I gathered everything, every text message, every voicemail, every witness who had heard Mark talk about taking over the house. Neighbors wrote statements. Contractors confirmed he'd hired them without my consent. My lawyer built a case that painted a very clear picture of harassment and attempted fraud. And then, on her advice, I did something that felt nuclear. I filed for a restraining order. The court date was one of the worst days of my life. Sitting in that room with Mark across from me, feeling his glare, listening to him portray himself as the victim, made me physically sick. Emily sat next to him, holding his hand, refusing to look at me. When it was my turn to speak, my voice shook at first, but then I looked at the judge and told the truth. I talked about the house, about my parents, about the years of work it took to buy it. I talked about the fear I felt watching him break in. I talked about the betrayal. And for the first time, I saw doubt flicker across Emily's face. The judge granted the restraining order. Mark was ordered to stay away from me and my property. The relief I felt was overwhelming. I cried in my car afterward, not out of sadness, but out of exhaustion. I thought, finally, it's over. But life isn't that neat. A few months later, Emily showed up at my door, not the beach house. My actual home. She looked smaller somehow, drained. She told me she was leaving Mark. That after everything, after the legal consequences and the constant tension, she'd finally seen him for who he was. He'd blamed her for everything, for not handling me better, for letting it escalate. Hearing that broke my heart in a way I can't fully explain. We sat on my couch and cried together like we used to as kids. She apologized, not just for siding with him, but for not protecting me. I forgave her, but I was honest that things would never be the same. Trust doesn't snap back into place like a rubber band. Mark didn't go quietly. He sent angry emails until my lawyer shut that down. He tried to spin the story online, painting himself as a wronged husband. It didn't work. People saw through it. Eventually, he faded out of my life completely, and the silence he left behind was peaceful. Now, when I go to the beach house, it feels different. Safer, but also heavier. It carries the memory of everything that happened there. But it's still mine. I sit on the deck some evenings and think about how close I came to losing it. Not just physically, but emotionally. I learned a brutal lesson about boundaries and about how blood doesn't always mean loyalty. So that's my story. That's how my sister's husband tried to claim my beach house, and how it all ended with police, courtrooms, and a family forever changed. If you think I did the right thing by standing my ground, like this video. If you think you would have handled it differently, tell me how in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, where ordinary life takes a shocking turn, subscribe to the channel. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess below, because I genuinely want to know what you would have done in my place. I'll see you all in the next story. I found out my sister's husband was trying to claim my beach house the same morning a police cruiser pulled up outside my gate. Lights flashing against the ocean mist, and the look on his face when he realized he wasn't in control anymore is something I will never forget. I'm still not sure if what I did after that makes me the villain in this story, or the only sane person left in a family that had completely lost its mind. So I need you to tell me honestly, was I wrong for standing my ground, or would you have done the exact same thing in my place? Because here's the thing, this wasn't just about a house, or money, or ego. This was about boundaries, betrayal, and the slow, creeping realization that someone you welcomed into your family was quietly sharpening a knife behind his back. So, before you judge me, before you decide whose side you're on, let me take you back to the beginning, back to when this beach house was nothing more than a dream, and my sister's husband was just a charming guy who laughed too loud at family dinners. The beach house came into my life long before my sister ever met him. I was in my late 20s, burned out from city life, working a job that paid well but hollowed me out piece by piece. I'd grown up going to this small coastal town every summer with our parents, staying in cheap rentals, waking up early to watch the sun rise over the water. Those memories were my safe place, the one constant when everything else felt unstable. When our parents passed away within a few years of each other, that town became even more important to me, like a thread tying me to them. I worked nonstop, saved aggressively, lived in a tiny apartment, and eventually, against all odds, I bought a modest but beautiful beach house just a few minutes' walk from the shore. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't flashy, but it was mine. Every creaky floorboard, every salty breeze through the windows felt like a reward I had earned with years of sacrifice. My sister, Emily, was always more carefree than me. We're close in age, but personality-wise, we might as well be from different planets. I was the planner, the worrier, the one who thought 10 steps ahead. She was spontaneous, emotional, and endlessly trusting. When she met Mark, she was head over heels almost immediately. He was charismatic, confident, the kind of guy who could strike up a conversation with anyone and make them feel like they were the most interesting person in the room. At first, I liked him. Everyone did. He helped with dishes without being asked, remembered small details about people, and always had a story to tell. When Emily brought him to see my beach house for the first time, he whistled low and said, "Whoa, you did good for yourself." I remember feeling proud in that moment, like I was finally being seen. After Emily and Mark got married, the beach house slowly turned into a family gathering spot. I didn't mind at first. I loved having people there, loved cooking big dinners, and sitting on the deck at night listening to the waves. Emily would ask before coming, and Mark would thank me every time, always making a point of saying how lucky we all were to have this place. But over time, something shifted. The comments changed. "You're barely here these days," he'd say casually, like an observation. "Places like this should be enjoyed, not locked up." Or, "Emily and I were thinking how great it would be to spend whole summers here when we have kids." He always said it with a smile. But there was an edge to it, a sense of entitlement that made my stomach tighten. I brushed it off for longer than I should have. Part of me didn't want to believe anything was wrong. Mark was my sister's husband. He was family. And Emily seemed so happy. But then the boundaries started dissolving completely. I'd show up to the house unannounced only to find Mark there alone, inviting friends over, using my things. When I confronted Emily, she'd laugh it off and say, "Oh, Mark thought it was fine since you weren't using it." I tried to explain that it wasn't about usage. It was about respect, but she'd get defensive, saying I was being possessive or selfish. The first real fight happened after I discovered Mark had listed my beach house address as his mailing address on some documents. I found out because a piece of official-looking mail showed up addressed to him. When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said it was just easier, and that it didn't mean anything. Something about that answer set off alarm bells in my head. I told him directly that it wasn't okay, that he needed to change it immediately. He apologized, but it felt performative, like he was saying what he needed to say to make the conversation end. Things escalated quickly after that. Emily called me one night in tears, saying Mark felt like I didn't trust him, that he thought I didn't consider him family. I tried to explain my side, but it turned into an argument where somehow I ended up apologizing just to keep the peace. Looking back, that was my mistake. I taught him that pushing my boundaries had no real consequences. Then came the renovations. I arrived at the beach house one weekend to find contractors there, ripping out cabinets I loved. Mark had decided the kitchen needed an upgrade. He hadn't asked me. He hadn't even told me. When I lost it, truly lost it, he acted offended, saying he was increasing the value of the property, as if it belonged to him too. Emily sided with him, saying I should be grateful. That was the moment something inside me broke. I told them both, very clearly, that they were no longer welcome at the house without my explicit permission. For a few weeks, things were quiet. Too quiet. Then I got a call from a neighbor asking if I'd sold the house. Confused, I said no. She hesitated before telling me she'd overheard Mark telling someone he was in the process of taking over the place, and that it was basically his now. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I drove to the beach house immediately and found Mark there again, this time with a locksmith. A locksmith. When I demanded an explanation, Mark smiled and said Emily had told him I was fine with it, that they were just making things official. Official how? I asked. That's when he dropped the bomb, casually mentioning he'd been looking into adverse possession laws and squatters' rights, that since he'd been maintaining the property and staying there regularly, he might have a claim. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. This man, my sister's husband, had been plotting to take my house. Not borrow it, not share it. Take it. I told him to leave immediately or I'd call the police. He laughed. Actually laughed, said I was overreacting and that family doesn't call cops on family. That laugh still echoes in my head sometimes. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with every worst-case scenario. Losing the house would mean losing the last tangible piece of my parents, the place that anchored me. I contacted a lawyer the next morning. She confirmed my fears but also reassured me that Mark's claim was nonsense, at least for now. But she warned me that I needed to act decisively. Document everything, change the locks. Make it crystal clear he had no permission to be there. She also suggested sending a formal cease and desist letter. When Emily found out, she accused me of trying to ruin her marriage. She said Mark was just stressed, that I was misunderstanding his intentions. I asked her point blank if she knew he was trying to take my house. She went quiet. That silence told me everything. This is the point where I need you to stop for a second and really think about what you would do. Imagine it's your sibling, someone you've loved your whole life, standing by a person who is actively trying to steal from you, gaslighting you into thinking you're the problem. So that was the situation I was in, backed into a corner, exhausted, furious, and heartbroken. Before I tell you what happened next, before I explain how things went from tense to explosive, I want you to pause and ask yourself, if you were me, would you protect yourself no matter the cost, even if it meant blowing up your family, or would you keep swallowing your anger to keep the peace? Because after that moment, after that realization, everything changed. And the next steps I took set off a chain of events that led directly to that police car outside my gate and Mark's smile finally disappearing. But that's where this first part of my story has to end, with me standing on the edge of a decision that would either save my home or tear my family apart, knowing there was no going back once I crossed that line.